Hi guys, welcome back. Today we are going to talk about solving quadratic inequalities. We've talked a little bit about solving quadratic equations, but now we're going to talk about inequalities. Okay, so this will take place in your Springboard book on page 116. You will need a pen or a pencil and probably your calculator. So let's go ahead and get started. As I mentioned, we are going to solve quadratic inequalities, and then we're also going to graph those solutions to quadratic inequalities on a number line. Okay, so it says here, factoring is also used to solve quadratic inequalities. So basically what we're looking at here, if you look at this, it looks very similar to a quadratic equation, but there's an inequality sign instead of an equal sign. So it's going to be pretty similar. Step one, it says you're going to factor the quadratic expression on the left. So obviously what you're going to have to do is make sure your whole quadratic expression is on the left and that it's an inequality set equal to 0, just like we were doing with equations. So you're going to factor that on the left, determine where those zeros would be. So use your zero product property and set those factors equal to 0. And then that's what it would be on the number line. And step 3 is where I'm going to differ just a little bit. Instead of using this signs that they do, we're just going to test a point. So if you look at what's in this little red box over here, you may want to kind of jot down these. But it says step 1, we're going to factor the inequality. Step 2, we're going to find solutions and plot open or closed circles on the number line. So those are still pretty similar. But step 3, we're going to label 0 on a number line and use a test point. And then plug 0 into the original inequality and shade in the correct areas. So basically what we're going to do is choose a number that's in between your two values. In this case, we would be able to use 0, but you cannot always use 0. So I just want to make that clear. But if you can use 0, it's the easiest test point. Remember when we were doing inequalities before? We were using 0, 0 because it's the easiest thing to test. Okay, so you're going to test a point, and then if it makes the inequality true, you're going to shade there. If it makes it false, you're going to shade the opposite way. Okay, so let's go ahead and try one. Okay, and we're actually going to do, I don't have a whole lot of room here, so I'm going to move to the next page and do these, but these are on page 116, and you guys can do those there. Okay, so part A says use the number line provided to solve 2x squared plus x minus 10. So let's get started, and remember our factoring skills. So first of all, this is all good to go, and it's 0 is on the right side, so we're all good there. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and factor, and remember this here is not, we can't use our shortcut because we have that 2 out front. So we take our 2 and multiply it by negative 10. So negative 20 goes in the top, and then this would be a 1, so 1 goes in the bottom. So what multiplies to negative 20? That adds to 1, and that's going to be a positive 5 and a negative 4, right? 5 times negative 4 is negative 20. 5 plus negative 4 is a positive 1. So I have to plug those in. Remember, cannot do the shortcut here. So there we go, plugging them in the middle. And now I'm going to group. Oops. And I can take out an x from here, and I'm left with 2x plus 5. And I can take out a negative 2 from here, and I'm left with 2x plus 5. All right, so remember these have to match up, so that becomes one of my factors. And then these GCFs that we took out are the other one. And I'm going to leave a little space in between those. So I'm going to write x minus 2 as my other factor. Okay, now the next part, that was just step 1 of factoring the left side. Next part is you're going to set those equal to 0, and you're going to solve. So in this one, you would subtract 5 over. So 2x equals -5. And then you would divide by 2. And so we would get x equals -5/2, or -5 divided by 2 is -2.5. And then I would just add the 2 over in this other one, so x equals 2. Okay, so far nothing really different from solving an equation, but now here's where we have to change up our steps a little bit. So here's where we look at this inequality and remember that if it has the equal sign underneath, like so, then it is a closed circle. If it does not, if it's just a less than or a greater than, it has the open circle. So in this case, we know we're going to have a closed circle, and that's going to be, let's move this up a little. That's going to be at -2.5, so that's going to fall right here. And at a +2, so that's right here, and we did closed circles. Okay. Now, as I mentioned, you're going to want to test a point, and you always want to test a point that falls in between those two values. So I would be testing one of those. I personally am going to test 0 just because it's the easiest. So 2 times 0 squared plus 0 minus 10 is less than or equal to 0. So 2 times 0 squared is 0 plus 0 minus 10. So that's going to be a -10. And then you have to read this to yourself and say, okay, is -10 less than or equal to 0? And that is true. -10 is less than 0. So because this is true, we would shade in between. If it were false, we would shade outside. Okay, so then because it is true, we can write this as, it's like an and problem, right? So we can write this as 2.5 is less than or equal to x, which is less than or equal to 2. So now we know this x value falls in between, just like where we shaded. So that's how you're going to write your final answer. Okay, questions on that? You can go ahead and put them in the response. All right, then we're going to move on to the next example, example B. And here we have x squared plus 3x minus 4 is less than 0. So we've got our trinomial there on the left that we're going to factor, and 0 on the right, so we know we're good to go there. So let's get right into our factoring. And this one we're going to put -4 in the top and 3 in the bottom. And in this one we will be able to use our shortcut because of that lead coefficient of 1. So what multiplies to -4 that adds to 3? That's going to be a +4 and a -1. Okay, so then you're going to write that as x plus 4 equals 0 and x minus 1 equals 0. And here's where I'm telling you guys your factoring skills have to be good because we're going to keep using it. But now we're going to subtract over that 4 and get x equals -4, and add over that 1 and get x equals 1. So now I'm going to do an open circle on those 2 points. And let's move this up a little. So I need an open circle on -4 and a open circle on 1. And again, I'm going to test 0. So I have 0 squared plus 3 times 0 minus 4 is less than 0. So now let's check. 0 squared is 0. 3 times 0 is 0 minus 4. So that's going to be -4. So again, read it to yourself. -4 is less than 0. Again, that is true. So we would shade in between. And then in your final answer, x is going to go between those numbers. So -4 and 1 with less than signs, because that was what was in your original inequality. And that's it. That's your final answer. Okay. All right, let's try one more together. So now we have 3x squared plus x minus 10 is greater than or equal to 0. Okay, so this one, whoops, we're not going to be able to use the shortcut because of that 3 out front. And now let's go ahead and factor because it's set equal to 0 already. So 3 times negative 10 is negative 30. That's what goes in the top, a times c. And then a 1 is going to go on the bottom. So what multiplies to negative 30? That adds to 1, and that should be 6 and negative 5. So now I'm going to plug those in. 3x squared plus 6x plus 5, or sorry, minus 5x. Oh no. 3x squared plus 6x minus 5x minus 10. And I'm going to group. I can take a 3x out of this first group, and I'm left with x plus 2. And I can take a negative 5 out of the second group, and I'm left with x plus 2. So x plus 2 equals 0. What's in the parentheses matches up. That becomes one factor, and 3x minus 5 becomes your other. And I'm just setting them equal to 0. So in this first one, I would subtract 2 over and get x equals negative 2. And in the second one, I would have to add 5 over and then divide by 3. So x equals 5/3. Okay. Or if you want, you can write it as 1 2/3, 1.6 repeating, however you want to write that. Okay. All right. I need to go ahead and plot those on my number line here with a closed circle because of the equal sign. And then here, somewhere in between there, looks good. And then we're going to test a point. Again, in this case, 0 fell between them. It won't always work out that way, but if it does, why not use 0? It's easy. Okay, because again, 0 squared is 0. 3 times 0 is 0. Plus 0 minus 10 is greater than or equal to 0. So then we end up with negative 10 is greater than or equal to 0. And in this case, is negative 10 greater than 0? No, that is false. So this would be an example where we can no longer shade here because that's not true. 0 does not make that true. So we actually shade this part here and this part here. Whoops. And then how you're going to write this is x is less than or equal to negative 2 because it's going this way, and x is greater than or equal to 5/3. And we would write this as an OR problem. Okay, so x is less than or equal to negative 2, or x is greater than or equal to 5/3, but it cannot be in between there. Okay, so basically, if you test a middle point and it comes out true, you're going to shade that middle area, and it's going to be an AND problem. If you test a middle point and it comes out false, you're going to shade the outer regions, and it's going to be an OR problem. Okay. All right, awesome. We'll do some more practice with this in class tomorrow during our Zoom. Other than that, have a good one. Bye-bye.